Tens of thousands of football fans came to Highbury. Electrifying!
Yes, guys, welcome back to the Cannon Podcast. Stop pure X arguments, get out the WhatsApp chats, ignore your friends at work. We are back. We are back to talk Arsenal, to discuss all things Man City, the chat. The boys are here. How are you both? Good?
That's a strong word.
What a start to the show. Welcome back to the main podcast, everyone. How are you? Hope you're doing well. If you're joining us for the first time, make sure you like, sub, and all that good stuff on YouTube. If you're listening to us on the podcast apps, give us a review. Why not? We're going to try and break down everything that's been going on in the Arsenal sphere. We are also recording as the Ballon d'Or ceremony is going on, so we may get a Ballon d'Or winner as we record a live Here We Go for the Ballon d'Or winner. Declan Rice? No, he's already... Where is he? 26th, I think he was?
I think he's 27th.
27th. We take that. Victor G came 15th above Haaland. Interesting. Right, let's get into it, boys.
Can I get my word of the day, actually?
Sorry, yeah. Very, very, very important part of the podcast. Sorry.
Melancholy.
Melancholy?
Yeah.
Melancholy? Was that intentional?
So, well, as you saw me on my phone, I was just double checking if I could hear it right, if I could get the pronunciation.
That's what it was.
I couldn't hear it, so I thought, let me just guess.
Oh, Rohan.
Oh, that's 2 weeks in a row. It's a great one.
Yeah.
And it's actually how I feel.
If I were you, I'd be asking for that to be clipped, not to get clipped up. But yeah, unfortunately, melancholy is what we're all feeling after. Well, I don't know. Let's talk. Obviously, we are speaking after the Arsenal 1, Man City 1 game. Rohan did just record a whole rewatch of the game with James B, which is starting on our Patreon site. So you can go check that out if you want to do that. But we're here to talk the game. Let's just get into it, because I think there's so much meat on this bone. I think we could set it off on that sort of dark tone, but actually I think there are positives to discuss. Let's start with what went wrong and probably do the first sort of little bit of the podcast on that, and then I want to talk about what went right as a sort of vague structure. Rohan, you have just watched the game, so let's come to you. Lots of talk about potentially a conservative setup. Lots of talk about how he managed the game, maybe substitutions, whatever it might be. In terms of what went wrong in that game, what do you see? Where do you stand?
I have a lot of thoughts, and I felt really sad yesterday, not gonna lie, after the game. Like, you had the joy of the
melancholic
goal. Exactly. You had the joy of the goal, and you were there in the ground, you're celebrating it, it's fantastic, it's great, but then reality hits in for me, and like, this is a game I felt it would have been great to win. I felt we had a really good opportunity to win it as well. I rewatched it now, before watching it with James. So I watched it 2.5 times now. And my same feelings, are there for me. And so it's going to be quite long-winded. Now, we said it on TCP Live, right? Where I think an educated guess that you could take going into this game, and this is coming from someone who's watched every City game this season in the Premier League, and how they've operated, and it's different. And that's why I felt it wasn't going to be a game of cat and mouse. When we played Man City over the years, when we became, really good in terms of being a title contender, it has been cat and mouse. It's been really fine margin based. It's like Rodri moves here, we respond. Edison moves here, we respond, and so on and so on. I didn't think it was going to be that type of game because of who they have in goal. They have Donnarumma in goal. Now, Donnarumma has some very good qualities in areas that I think we all know. You don't need to be a tactico to know what that guy is good at. He's massive.
Big.
He's big. He's huge. And we all saw that Pep Guardiola press conference beforehand where he was being a bit naughty.
With the wing.
But he's not as good as Edison on the ball. Edison's elite. In fact, he's not even as good as Ortega on the ball. And you saw that every time he pressed and they tried to play out, he hit it out for a throw-in. He wasn't comfortable in that scenario. And that's why I felt it was going to be more of a direct game. One in which City are going to try and bypass our press by simply going over the top. And you saw it every single time they had an indirect set piece, deep. Donnarumma's hitting it long every single time. It's not a City that we're used to, but I felt we could have read that a little bit better. And what I mean by that is because I think, now, the narrative of the Liverpool game, the discourse that has came there is now featuring now post City, which I think is unfair because it's two different games. But what I believe is that the high levels of tactical astuteness out of possession in the press was not more important than the on-the-ball quality, the pure on-the-ball quality, because I felt it was more of a game for us to take the initiative and to put it on City. Now, then that's where I feel a bit frustrated with the Mikel Marino selection. And I know I don't like doing lineup analysis, but I think it's really important here because I do feel we did so many good things in the first half, but I think that really pulled us back in terms of the threat that we could have caused. The final point, and I know I'm going rambling on a lot, but
go for it.
For me, so when we built out and we were looking to play through City's pressure, and you saw it, we cut through them with ease. This is what I mean. We played some really good stuff. And what they did, they have their back four. They've got Cousinov, they've got O'Reilly, they're pinned by our wingers, and Gyökeres is pinning the two centre-backs. They're not jumping high. They wanted to keep that back four intact. So there's 4 players. Then you've got the 2 in midfield, Reinders and Rodri, who are man-marking the 2 number 8s when they're in the pockets. Then you've got Bernardo Silva, Haaland, Doku, Foden. So the front 4, and you see what we tend to do, you have our pivot in Zubimendi and Rice predominantly occupying different heights, alternating, they're doing all that sort of stuff. The important bit of information here is if you look at our right-hand side, when Haaland pressed Saliba and Doku's there ready to press Timber, Zubimendi, he's so good. He's so smart at picking up these positions inside the block, ready to receive, to then allow us to go. And Reinders recognised that, so he jumped high on Zubimendi. So, who's free? It's Mikel Marino. Mikel Marino is constantly the spare man, and we found him many times. Now, he actually did quite a few really good things, some of his intuitive passes, but we manufactured so many scenarios where we got Marino free, and I just felt like if that was somebody else, if that was someone like Eze, if that was someone like Waneri, I just felt they could have gave us a little bit more in those scenarios deep when we escaped the pressure, but also higher. And that's the frustration I have. And that's why I think, when you're seeing like the analysis of Arsenal wasted 45 minutes, I think it's very important to not neglect the outside view. So what other people are saying, we all think very similarly. And, we push back on a lot of the narratives, especially the Liverpool one. But I do think there's some substance there in terms of we could have done so much more in that opening 45 minutes where we were fantastic. I also thought we did a lot of really good things in the second half as well. It's not a coaching thing here. And it's not a conservatism perspective from that lens. It's just who we could have picked in that space. That leaves me quite frustrated. So sorry, I waffled on a lot there, but I need to get off my chest because...
No, I think that's a good starting place because I think it's one of the big talking points from the game was obviously the lineup. I fully hear you. I think for the game that we played and the way the game panned out, I think your analysis is really good, and I don't think you're necessarily wrong. I think the difficulty is, right, of course, that if you'd asked me before the game, ultimately he doesn't have Odegaard available, right? If you'd asked me a direct, what game am I, Alex, expecting? I'm expecting a Marino game. I'm expecting that game. It didn't pan out that way. Marino, I think, didn't have his best game. I think, as you've alluded to, the way City played didn't necessarily lead to Marino being the best option in there. So that's a frustration. We'll come on to the more extenuating circumstances, and we'll come on to the what we got right, because I think there was a lot of stuff that we got right, but we are obviously sticking on the stuff that we maybe were frustrated with in that game. And I do want to stay there because it's important to talk about it, right? I think for me, the bigger frustration yesterday, I was at the game and I was sat in the clock end, and it's a different perspective. You obviously have the TV camera perspective, you have the lower bank perspective, higher perspective, and it's given me this perspective on the game. The big issue for me in the first half was the lack of movement across the last line. And let me try and just explain what I mean. So much of the time when you're watching the game side on, you don't see the gaps and you don't see the spaces that are being broken up because you just see banks of players. When you're end on, you really see how many missed opportunities there were to go forward. And you also see the movement really clearly of your last line. And we were, I feel, far too static when we had control of the game. We also, when Gyökeres was making certain runs, and I was talking to a couple of people beside of me, he was creating gravity. There was spaces where Gyökeres was moving and there was lanes opening up centrally, but because we were so worried about our rest defence with Rice and Marino, etc., we weren't exploiting those spaces. I don't feel we were making those forward runs necessarily. And that was my real frustration, and also the Trossard pick as well. I think for me the Merino one, I kind of go, if you're picking between the two, would I have picked Waneri? It's before the game, whatever. And I understand what you're saying, but I think it's it's lower down my priority list. For me, it's the Trossard one because that is something you intended to do, if that makes sense. That's not a game you prepared for, and the Trossard pick was him coming inside. Was him affecting things, creating those overloads, and I just felt that is an Eze game. If you're giving me that role, if you're saying here's a Trossard game and the game that he was going to play, the game that Mikel gave him to play, for me Eze was more suited to do that. So yeah, as I say, I want to come on to different conversations. I don't want to just moan the whole podcast, but George, we should discuss what went wrong. What was your feeling on what went wrong?
There is a couple things, because I want to start off by saying what went wrong for us is ironically something that isn't quite the same, but also Pep did something very wrong in the second half in response to us that nobody seems to want to talk about in terms of going 5-4-1, but maybe we park that for the next part. Look, the decision to go Trossard and Merino is the fault for me as opposed to one or the other. And I can make individual arguments for either. As far as Trossard goes, he's objectively our best record attacker against City. What I mean by that is of the available players that we had, ignoring those that are new players, Trossard is the one with the most historical record against City specifically. There's that to contend with. The Merino aspect, for me, actually has a little bit more to do with fear on Rodri in build-up, very, very specifically, and having somebody that he feels is going to win that duel or guarantee to win that duel. And then the point about in possession rolling outside the block and in that pivot to receive and who's carrying in those zones, Merino, Ethan, Eze, all very different types of carriers, but ultimately carriers that receive outside the pivot to carry you up the pitch. That's the concern in possession. Then what you have to contend with is what has killed Arsenal against Manchester City when it didn't go right in the past, which I think people are ignoring personally, is the Bernardo Silva dropping into the pivot and what he does in terms of accessing areas for City. That's how we've been undone in the past. So I don't agree, but I'm going to give you the coaching logic. To match up man-to-man in the press, he's picked both Trossard and Merino, who are workhorses, to hopefully follow a Bernardo Silva who will drop into the pivot and provide himself as an option. Now, I'm going to say I won't do that. I personally don't agree with it. I think that Eze can absolutely learn that trigger because it's a following job. It's a man-to-man assignment. However, I think he's going with the perspective of I trust Trossard and Merino, who are both going to mark out Rodri and Bernardo Silva and cut the service to Haaland, because the best way to beat Haaland is not to beat him one-on-one. As we saw, even if you're the center back partnership that we have, if that man gets a yard of space, he's going to score a goal. The coaching logic is he can't score if he doesn't get the ball. And let me eliminate all access to the ball. Now, I have prefaced this with I don't agree. But I think that's the coaching logic that Mikel has started the game with. And I just want to paint the picture because these games are tight. For as much as people, I think, had gone into this game saying City are vulnerable, City are bad. And I think that does play into our disappointment quite a bit on the lineup because we have this perception that it's not the same City. But Mikel certainly doesn't think so. And I'll tell you who also doesn't think so. It's Pep. And just the way that the game played out, it was this bet that I think Mikel took with Trossard and Merino being responsible for the Bernardo Silva dropping into the pivot and the Rodri impact of that pivot, which, by the way, wasn't a factor in the 5-1 previously. We don't have Rodri at build-up, which is a completely different dynamic and fear for Mikel specifically. The frustration that I have personally is you've got to now start to pair this with what is our reference over the top for ourselves in possession. Rohan, you talked about somebody dropping outside the pivot, i.e. a Waneri, a Merino, an Eze, whatever you'd like, somebody dropping outside our pivot to be an option in possession, right? Brilliant. That's one way of progressing up the pitch. But Nani was doing a brilliant job of accessing that. So from my perspective, the carrying on the right-hand side, sure, it could have gone from an A to an A+ with somebody that was a little bit more proficient and prolific in that regard. But my question has to be, who is the reference over the top and the access to the left-hand side that changes some of the line and changes some of the movement that we're seeing? Because even if I added a better carrier on the right, and even Eze, who's an earlier passer, the lost potential, let's call it, in possession, for me, is a lot smaller than what we didn't do on the left. And the biggest thing for me is if you don't have that variety and you don't have that variation, you leave yourself very predictable in attack. And what we had hoped was that these new signings would open up that unpredictability, both sides, to leave more gaps overall. To tie this basically off is I felt that you could make an individual argument for either of those selections. What I struggle with is making an argument for the both of them coming inside and doing that role. I can't seem to defend that. And that's where I think Mikel got this wrong. And I think he kind of recognized that at halftime when we talk about the changes. Yeah. There's a lot of things that happened, but I did want to be very specific because I don't think it's just opening up the carrying and the right-hand side here. For me, it's the complete ignorance of the left in possession that hurts us. Because if we add somebody that's a better carrier on the right, Nani was already doing a brilliant job against O'Reilly, who, by the way, had a very good game individually from a City perspective. And we should give credence to a team that has been criticized defensively, but for this game was actually very good defensively. And sometimes I think that's part of the problem is that teams build up. We don't like each other, by the way. We really don't. The teams don't. You see that with Gabriel and with Haaland. And I think that people step up their game. And the City and Arsenal games are very high tactical games for me. So that's all to say that I really criticize the selection of both Merino and Trossard. I don't agree with the logic of fearing the Bernardo Silva drop in the pivot so much so that you're going to ignore accessing the left, because a simple Eze change with Merino does one of two things. You block off the Rodri aspect, and by the way, you do have a reference over the top. I don't want to kill this, but that was a real big issue from an Arsenal perspective, where I don't think Gyökeres was able to really make the ball stick, even in the channels. And so having Merino has a dual function, where not only is he able to block off the out-of-possession Rodri point, but he also becomes a reference over the top aerially to knock on for Gyökeres to run onto. So that's a logic that I could maybe get behind. But the issue I have is then why don't you have Eze, who's able to access the left-hand side and add up that variation? You've got Nani, who's going to stretch on the right, who's stretching the left, and you're left with kind of Gyökeres and Merino being a pair that, whilst in theory is complementary, I don't think is plan A for either of us, when we're making our selections. So it ended up being something where the team was very predictable. We looked at Nani, and we weren't progressing in the way that we could with all the possession and dominance that we did have in the game.
15 minutes of the Cannon podcast, not criticising Mikel. There you go. Because we never do it. Let's try and pick at some of these threads, Rohan, and try and sort of get a sense of the way forward. I think a number of threads that sort of came out of that I want to go back to. How are we feeling about this sense of sort of the conservatism of Mikel, or the sort of feeling? I've got a couple of thoughts I want to get from you, because there's a part of me that's kind of, this has always been Mikel. This has always been Mikel in the big games. This has always been the way he has functioned. I was looking back at some lineups of points last season. It's difficult last season because we didn't have a lot of the squad available in a lot of the big games. But if you go back to say 23-24, 22-23, he's never gone, let's say, Rice, Vieira, Odegaard, or things like that in big games. He's never one to do that. But our record in big six games is really, really good. It's fantastic. So you've got to sort of, I understand and sort of buy into some of the conservatism in terms of what we said about Trossard and what you guys have said about Marino and what George was making about the left-hand side. I buy into it there, but I sort of don't buy into it in other ways, or certainly we don't discuss it on days where, when ultimately when we win, right? And that's the big thing. The second thing is also what I saw yesterday in terms of the response was the furthest thing from conservatism that I've ever seen from Mikel. So if we're going to have the conservatism conversation, let's at least acknowledge that something has shifted in terms of the way we approach the game, in terms of the early substitutions, in terms of, what we wanted at the end. We're taking off Timber for Waneri and ending up with basically Zubimendi playing centre-back. That is not Mikel. So there is conservatism to Mikel it's got us results in the past, and we've seen shifts. So yeah, how do you sort of, because there is something to critique here as well. Do you know what I mean? It's a hard balance to strike.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite nice because we spoke about this last week in terms of the freedom debate, and how I really push back on the idea that Mikel doesn't allow players to express themselves, and I'll continue to push back on that. And just to quickly add into the Merino point, and hindsight is a wonderful thing, right? Because I remember when we did TSP live, and I was like, I could understand him picking Mikel Merino in this game, but it's not something that I would have done because of how I felt City would have played. And then as they did play, it made me even more frustrated. But this is why I'm not a coach, really, So it's like, you do have that hindsight. But going back to your point about conservatism, you can look at it from a macro and micro level. So from a macro level, did you watch that game yesterday and think Arsenal went in there not to win? And how we played? Not a chance.
I didn't.
Not a chance. Please, no. You are lying. If you genuinely think that the way that we played in that first half and in the second half as well was a team looking to play for a result as opposed to play for a win, I think it's really unfair. Really unfair. So that's a macro level. So I don't think we're conservative there at all. Where you could maybe see the argument of conservatism is from Micro's perspective of looking at individual players and what matchups we're looking for. We've just spoken about Mikel Merino and his role and the idea and the logic behind it. There always is logic behind the decisions that Mikel makes because his record speaks for itself. It's not a small sample size. We're talking about 22 games before the Liverpool result in which we have been fantastic. And I can reel off Liverpool at home, 23-24. Remember that game? We were fantastic. We've had some great games against Chelsea as well, great games against Spurs. These are big games in which we've came out on top time and time again. But I think the conservatism point, when you look at Mikel Merino, is Mikel Merino a conservative choice in isolation? No, because his weaknesses lie when he comes deep to receive the ball. Where Mikel Merino comes alive is in the final third, and what he does in terms of the threat he poses there, and statistically the number of opportunities that he does find himself in the final third. But when it's relative to an Eze and a Waneri, it is conservative, because Mikel Merino is going to be able to implement the tactical game plan that Mikel believes is what's going to get us over the line in that game. So I think there's a conservatism when you're talking about a specific individual that he selects. But in terms of how we play, I really push back on the idea that we were conservative in our play. We were looking to try and attack City from the get-go. Like, what he said post-match, I actually think he was spot on with a lot of his analysis where he was like, it's quite unfair how City scored because we did everything in the opening 8 minutes and they had that one situation. We lose a few duels and then Haaland's on his bike. He's a horse. He gallops and he gets there and it's done in that scenario. But we continue to attack and we continue to play. There maybe is a conversation though in terms of who he picked in specific areas of the pitch.
Yeah, and George, this conservatism, you could so go down the route of like, well, if Mikel's conservative, Man City had the lowest possession in a single match under Pep Guardiola and the fewest passes attempted in a single Premier League match under Pep and the most clearances made. You can go down that route. I think that's slightly missing the point though, because I do hear what people are saying, and I do get it when I don't agree in terms of I saw. I won't name them, but prominent people in the Arsenal space that are saying, this manager's scared to lose and all this sort of stuff. I don't agree, but from the selections and from some of the things, I understand how they've come to that conclusion. So I think it's unfair to just go, this is just a completely bogus thing. Where is the conservatism for you, and where isn't it? I guess is the question.
I find it very difficult to argue with Mikel Arteta in big games. Regardless of whether you feel the lineups are conservative or not, you cannot argue with output. Like you have to pick a struggle for me. And, is the struggle points and winning? And no matter what, is that your point? Because that's the point of trophies. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Because there is no manager that comes even close to Mikel Arteta. And if people are going to talk about how, well, this season it doesn't matter, it's 2 games. Don't come with that when I've got over 2 years of sample that say completely things to the contrary. So for me, that is the line. If you're going to talk about comments in game, if we're going to talk about micro levels, which I'd like to discuss on like outlier games, we can have conversations. I think it's more so fear because it's not the big games I fear with Mikel and conservatism. It's actually physical mid-block games. It's actually teams that you would consider to beat. Is he more conservative? Now there,
next week,
I believe, yes, there,
yeah, that's the
we
conversation.
now have a conversation to have. And I think there's rightful concerns there. But the idea of big games, I wash away. I'm sorry, I don't agree with most people that want to talk about it because the sample is just simply untrue. Now, in terms of just the conservative point as a broad thing on the freedom and on the and on our play specifically, I hope we get a chance to talk because there is a lot of Wengerism things that people want to demand that we did in this game. The manner in which we flipped and chased the game is completely different to what Mikel has done last year. There are a lot of things I saw in that second half and objectively feel that second half is one of the best performances I've seen against Liverpool and Man City specifically. One of, not the best, but one of the best halves of football that we've played against them in the last 3-4 years. And I think it will get washed because, Alex, when you bring up those points, see, part of my problem is people want us to play attacking football and push City to those stats. But then when we receive those stats, it's, well, City went into a low block, so it's unfair to say those as metric. Well, hold on. Who forced them to go into that low block? Who played the game to the point of forcing Pep to go 5-4-1 with no center forward? Like, we have killed Mikel back last year in September when we suffered that late equalizer from the 10-man red card instance. Mikel got killed. The narrative in the media and everything was playing for a draw. It's weak. It's this. It's that. I have waited now 24 hours and seen nothing on the big, great Pep Guardiola going 5-4-1, taking off one of his better players in terms of Phil Foden, one of his best outlet in Holland in the moment for over 20 minutes. And he himself added more defenders to go and play for a draw for over 20 minutes. So when people start to say, well, we did nothing in 20 minutes, well, yeah, we were having a bank of 6. I'm sorry, guys. People are being incredibly obtuse to the facts of those stats for me, where we have seen it. We have seen other teams do it. We ourselves have done it. You see why it's so difficult to break down those blocks. And I think Liverpool, your favorite XG miners that face those teams, also struggle. Burnley, for example, when they played them, how long did it take them to break that down? So it's incredibly, for me, disingenuous to ignore that context as a whole. The thing that I believe people do have a right to complain about, though, is completely this conservatism against teams we should be beating. This, to me, has a completely different conversation, and we probably need another section and segment to discuss it, because that's your Villas, your West Hams, your Newcastles. Guys, Fulham, you have a point there for me. I don't agree in the big games.
And we'll come to the second half in a second, so I think that's worth talking about. But I think you said a phrase there, pick your struggle. And I think you're right. It's like, ultimately, we have a struggle, maybe, of a conservatism in those mid-block games that we talk about. We have this game happen, and that gets applied here. And that's not how I saw the game. Ultimately, you're right. People will take those stats and they'll go, well, doesn't that prove my point, or doesn't it just prove that Arsenal pushed them back, or doesn't it prove that actually City gave up and they don't think we can break down mid blocks, or whatever it is? You're going to use those stats in whatever way you use it, but I think you're right. You have to be consistent in what is the issue. Rohan, let's come to the second half, because I think we should sort of sit on this a little bit and sit about the positives really from what we saw in that game, right? This was a very, very different second half and a very, very different way of approaching a game. I think in the first half, I think you had a discussion earlier, but one of another big issues in the first half, and maybe something that I would put in the Mikel struggle across more consistently, is tempo in the final third. And I thought our tempo got a lot better. Certainly from where I was sat, I felt as though we were moving the ball a lot quicker. There was a lot more intent and purpose to our play. We were finding players in different pockets of space, using the same side stuff that we've spoken about before, with Declan Rice spoke about on that Athletic article that you absolutely love. There was lots of stuff in the second half that I thought, we have to be consistent, and it was much better. Yeah,
I think I can't fault the response. I've kind of killed Mikel a lot in this pod in terms of frustration in the first half, but he's admitted to the mistake that he made with the Eze sub, right? And you've got to give him credit there. Absolutely. There's always going to be that thing, and I have that feeling as well. It's like, oh, but you didn't start him, we wasted 45 minutes. And that's important, but at least he recognised it. He may not explicitly state it in the press conference, and that's a different conversation, but the actions speak loud, and he recognised that this was a game which Eze, in that right half space, which George has mentioned many times, that he's really loved him there. We were playing really well, and what, whether you think Arsenal's play directly forced City back or whether it was Pep's decision, ultimately it doesn't matter. Pep Guardiola, in 60 minutes in that game, said, I don't believe we can match up to this Arsenal team in terms of physically, from an intensity perspective. I don't believe our players in the back line can be able to keep up with the runs that they're going to be making, so I'm going to sink deeper. He's made that choice because he's worried about what Arsenal could do in that scenario.
He also said that as well.
Yeah.
And I think you can say, oh, well, he was lying.
Do you know what it is, mate? It's like, okay, right, if we keep it really simple, they've got 11 players on the pitch, and we all saw what they did. That is their intention. They felt that they could not withstand the pressure, so they sunk deeper. And guess what? People say, oh, but we didn't test Donnarumma enough, we didn't create enough threat. You cannot create that freely against a team that deploys a bank of 5, 4 in the middle, and then 6 when Timber went high to overload, they dropped Doku back. It's hard, mate. It's really hard. And the point that George made about Burnley, mate, Liverpool didn't break Burnley down. It came through a stupid handball, but that does get washed away from the analysis because it's outcome driven. What I saw in that second half was an Arsenal team that gave it everything. They gave it absolutely everything to try and get the result. And I did think that we went through a period where, I don't know if you felt this, Alex, I felt it's not happening today. When the goal came eventually, I didn't think it was going to happen. But they huffed and puffed and we tried. And I really liked the fact that Mikel continued to make changes. He threw as many attackers on as he possibly could. And then he's getting criticised for the Mascaras. The reason why I brought Mascara on is to potentially get an extra 30 seconds from the game to try and win it. And we weren't able to do it after the goal. Our response wasn't really good there, but we tried everything. And I can't fault the manager and the team's response in the second half. Just wish it was in the first. That's all.
Yeah, and results dictate everything, and I want to come to that in just a second. But George, quickly before we come to that, what did you see second half that was different for you?
Several things, and I think we need to be very specific because I actually haven't seen it on the timeline, and I get frustrated because there's a lot of things that we did that people have asked for. So number one, Bukayo Saka is world class. World class. I urge people to go back and rewatch some of the things that he was doing half fit. He single-handedly changed our access to different angles, to be honest with you. I was very happy to have Eze in the right half space. It's something people and listeners of this podcast know I've been screaming about, that dynamic of having Eze drifted to the right, which I felt was not being talked about enough as an option. And I will talk about that because Mikel specifically referencing it, by the way, is a massive component to what we could talk about this season. Being able to recognize that as a positional versatility and alternative to Odegaard, which he admitted in the press conference, wanting to do central, not on the wing. He made a point to talk about that. He's like, well, yes, I put him centrally because I wanted it.
Because he can do that.
Because he can do that. And I think that's an important backup to Odegaard point. That we should talk about. But anyways, keeping it on Bukayo, there was, I love Noni Madueke in the form he's in. Truly do. And he deserves all the credit because of everything that's happened. And I don't have to relitigate that. However, what Bukayo gives us
different beast
as a reference is completely different. And then the presence of mind that Bukayo, by the way, has completely evolved. And I've seen no one talk about how he switched multiple times out to the left to create a +1 solution and completely abandoned. We're talking about positional versatility, right? I have not seen one post on X or in the general narrative in the media when we talk about positional rigidity with Arsenal and Arteta referencing that Bukayo Saka switched sides and created an overload multiple times off the left. And he stayed there. And that was one thing. So switching sides of your wingers, which we completely did. The point about taking off Timber, by the way, and adding an attacker is something that people are completely glossed over. We added an...
Never seen him do that.
And it's just, I've not seen him do that. People wanted us to trust the rest defense. He did. He added an attacker and removed a defender. It was very un-Mikel, if you want to be very specific to it. And then finally, when we're talking about the Wengerism, count the amount of attacking players that were on the pitch searching for a goal. All of our pocket players were playing on the pitch. Ethan, Saka, Eze, Martinelli, in terms of some of those runs. Guys, it was
I think Madueke would have stayed on the pitch as well had he been fit.
I completely agree. And I think he would have moved to the left to be the one that was offering more of a strong-footed option on the left. And look, there was a lot of things there. I want to talk about the Martinelli, and I'll maybe throw it back to you guys. This is now 2 games on the spin in terms of cameo specifically that we've seen differences in terms of his central usage. I admit I like the player. I admit we've had talks about individual versus environment. I admit that we've had those conversations. But to me, this is another solution to when things aren't going right. And when we talk about rigidity and static movement in the front line, that is one thing you can never criticize Martinelli about. Yeah. And at some point, Mikel made a reference that he probably should have started in the post-match press conference. And he's certainly asking questions. And, at some point, in the same way I'm going to question the Eze of the whole Trossard and Merino, I'm going to question the lack of willingness to use Martinelli central. We've seen it time and time again. That ball over the top, the 2-touch finish is not easy to do. It's an incredible finish, take, and distance. The sharpness, and by the way, it's not the first time, guys. Like the cameo appearance against Liverpool, by the way, where he was played more of a central striker. He was doing this all the time. It's consistency at this point. So when you're combining some of these things, by the way, and let me wrap it up because I've talked a bit. We're talking about Saka changing sides. We're talking about adding attackers. We're talking about using Martinelli central. What else have people complained about to ask for positional freedom that you didn't see in the second half? If we're speaking honestly, I'm here to criticize the first. We did that at the top of the pod. No problem. Let's do that. But at the same token, be fair and talk about all of the different things that we saw in the second half and that he talked about. That's all.
Well, one point in that second half, we had Calafiori, who's, if you want to call him a defensive fullback, I think it's a little bit unfair.
Shots in our team, by the way, Alex. Update.
Most shot. He's updated now. He used to be third. We had Martinelli, Rice, who's a DM apparently, Zubamendi, Eze, Waneri, Gyökeres, and Saka, all on the pitch at the same time. And it is.
You can't say we didn't throw the kitchen sink at it.
We did, and we have it. And I genuinely, I could be wrong here. The last time I remember us doing that was that Bournemouth game, the 3-2 in the Reece Nelson game. That's the last time I remember us doing that, and I could be wrong, but that's the last time I recall it. Look, I want to comment on this because ultimately, look, we can sit here and we can play 2 sides, and this is kind of down to those numbers. You could look at those numbers about Pep and say, "Oh, Arsenal forced them back, and isn't that great?" Mikel's the first manager to go 5 games unbeaten against Pep in the career or something. There's some stats out there about his record against Pep. You can say there's 99 points left to play for, etc., etc. And Rohan, I want to come to you because this is really the crux of it. That game, I was at the stadium, felt like a cup final. It felt like a cup final, like it really did. And this is the issue. If we're going to be sat here on many, many Monday evenings to come, aren't we? After maybe some drop points. I hope maybe 2 or 3 more across the season, but unfortunately it's probably going to be more, where we've dropped points. And we're having what feels like crisis talks and coming on and feel, and ultimately that is kind of where we're at. I sit more, and I'll shock no one to say, on that side of, look at the numbers we put up, look at the way we approached the second half. Yes, there were mistakes, but we have 99 points left to play for in the Premier League. 99. Like, this is nowhere near. In March or April, February or March, I will not be having these conversations. We can, but they're kind of irrelevant. There comes a point where you just go like, it's just not important anymore. But this, to me, this game was a symbol of the fact that we are an incredibly good team. And also to make the fact that this is also a very new team. Those names I read out earlier, obviously Mosquera's new, obviously Zubamendi's new, obviously Eze's new, Gyökeres is new, Madueke's new. We have a lot of new players involved in and even, Calafiori isn't new, but he's, in terms of the impact on his team, you could go through like that. So I'm sitting on that side. I accept I'm a more positive fan or whatever. How do we do this? How do we get through a season where we are going to feel this lurch whenever we drop points? Because And at what point is the tipping point for you? For me, it's February, March, where these things start to just kind of fade into the background a little bit.
Tipping point for me is when I feel this team does not progress. Has this team progressed this season from what I saw last season with the players that we have? Absolutely. I think we've had a solid start to the season. I think for me, what it is like disappointment in the game and certain things, but then projecting, like having this confident belief that Liverpool are then just going to run away with it because they did so last season. I can't sit on that side because you don't know. So the big response is after Arsenal drop points is Liverpool have pulled away. They're 5 points ahead. And then you respond, if we will respond by saying it's only September. And then the counter to that is, well, we saw that last season. But how is that relevant? How is that? It's the same as our record in the big games is fantastic, right? But I said before the season that past performance doesn't always equate to future performance in terms of results. There is going to be a time where Arsenal will lose one of these big games. It can happen. And lo and behold, it's happened this season, right? So that's a great example of saying this, things can change. And the same way, you can argue that Liverpool are playing in second gear at the moment. Are Arsenal playing at their peak right now? Absolutely not. It works both sides. And I think for me, I won't be jumping ship until I feel that this team is not going forward with the coach. Until I see evidence that suggests that this team is not playing for him, this team is not progressing, that's when I'll be fearful. But right now, I see a team that is incredibly committed. Mate, we did so many good things against City. I cannot criticize our approach in the game. What we intended to do, some of the passing sequences, how we escaped their pressure, how we got into the final third. I can't critique that. It's simply, for me, it's going back to how we hate doing, lineup analysis. It's lineup analysis for me in this game. So there's so many positives there. There's so much more games to play. We're in September. The key for Arsenal is to not allow clusters to build. That is the big thing. We didn't allow it to build after the Liverpool game. Granted, we've not been able to pull away, but now it's the same again. We've dropped points. Don't then start dropping points against Newcastle and then West Ham, and then it becomes 3 games. That's when you do find yourselves playing catch up. But right now, there's so many games to go. Just relax, everyone. Relax. You can get frustrated, but relax.
Yeah, and I think it's that thing, isn't it? We are generally pretty positive, I would say, on that side, and that's not necessarily right, but I think it's being consistent. It's being consistent with your analysis and your critique. And if we are having these, as I say, if we're having the same conversations in February and March, I will be saying to you guys, I agree that the second half was better, but it doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean? We're getting to that point of the season, but we're not at that point of the season yet. And I also think in terms of, to your point about, the coach improving, the coach learning, and the players understanding each other. In Mikel's post-match press conference, there was a lot of stuff about, George mentioned it earlier about Martinelli potentially starting. He was talking about Eze, his sort of positioning and how that's going to develop. He was talking about Gyökeres. He was talking about chemistry. A lot of things. I don't know if you saw the interview with Ali McCoy, so he talks about big margins still. The coach, he's not sat there going, I don't know how that game happened. He sat there saying, I know what I'm not going to tell you, but I know, because that's stupid, but I know what I can improve, and we have to give it time. George, how much of this do you think, how do you think we manage that? And ultimately, what matters is the players manage it, not that the fans are appeased. How do we manage that as a group of players? And also, how much of that is, I don't want to, use a sort of therapy word, but sort of trauma from previous years or whatever it might be, because I did feel very much when that goal went in, I felt a fan base that had been hurt before in the ground. I felt everyone going, oh, it's happening again. And I think and I think that we have to acknowledge that is playing into it and could possibly be shifting us, basically.
I want to be fair, so I'll start off with my first thing, that I feel Mikel, the team, has a lot to prove in the next 4 games. I'll just read out the list of opponents that we've got coming up, just for people to have a little bit of a reminder. We've got Newcastle, St. James Park. We've got West Ham. We've got Fulham. We've got Palace. Those are
Port Vale, mate.
Port Vale. However, those are the next 4 games in the league. That's where we've lost the title. Can we just be perfectly honest? In the last 2 to 3 years, there's been some specific contests about, injuries, points that those injuries have been accumulated, whatnot. But generally speaking, physical mid blocks, if we were to define what those are, it's an example of all 4 of those teams. So from a team perspective, it's on them to show us the second half in these next 4 games. This is where I won't be as, well, it's the start of 90 minutes against City, it's Anfield. I won't be having those contexts because these are teams that we have to beat and we have to bully, actually. Not just beat, but we have to bully these teams to win the title. That's how you win. Of the available points against the top 6, we've had a brilliant record, but there are always more points available for teams outside the top 6. Simple maths. So you maximize those points, you maximize the available points you have left. That's number 1. Number 2 in all this, I hate to be a doomer, but I don't think this fan base is going to get any words of encouragement because at the end of the day, I said this last year, every loss was going to be the end of the world. It's going to be worse until the point that we have a discussion on the manager, period. I don't see, not just what I saw from yesterday. This isn't just a reaction from yesterday. I just see what this fan base is on the edge, guys, for whether or not people agree. This fan base is on the edge with the manager. This is the last season for many. For some, it was last season. I'd say, okay, I don't want to put this to numbers, but if I could, I'd say it's about 20-30% felt last year was his last season. Personally, there's about 20 to 30% of the fan base that I felt roughly could have said, no, he should have won last year. That's the temperature I got. 2 out of 10 people would have told me this. This year, if I have the conversation and even post City and whatnot, I think that there are 7 or 6 people out of 10 that would sit there and tell me, no, if we don't win a major honor, we really need to look on. He may not be able to take us to the next step. I'm not here to tell you what camp you should be in, but to me, that's the gauge I get, that the fan base is almost doubled in that I don't know. And it's not he's out territory. It's I don't know. And if you don't do this, you're gone, is the mentality that I see quite a bit. So if you're over 50% of the fan base, roughly for me, and that's just what I see, that are in that camp, you are going to see every game of drop points as a crisis, because then it starts to make that reality where you felt, I don't know, but now I do know, a reality. And that's where I think it's born from.
Just to further add on to your point, George, that attests to your argument in terms of, the next set of games being decisive, on top of the fact that, we have the cluster of 3 games, like the cluster of death I refer it to, because there's these 3 game periods where we just do not win. And they hurt us. They've hurt us in the past, and they will hurt us. They'll continue to hurt us if it continues to happen. Newcastle away and West Ham at home. How many points did we take from them last season? 0. Mm-hmm. How many points did we take from them the season before? 0. We've not taken points off these 2 teams, away from home at Newcastle and at home against West Ham. In fact, we've not scored a goal in 4 games. Again, I know I'm isolating these sorts of, but I'm just giving you context of these are certain matchups that Arsenal need to be superior in. So
these are the games. I think this little upcoming period is going to be really interesting. We've even got a lovely Simeone versus Arteta ball coming up on the 21st of October as well, which could be an interesting one. Let's move. Well, just briefly before we move on to the questions, I just want to give a couple shout outs. Yesterday, I thought Calafiori had one of his best games in an Arsenal shirt, and people won't necessarily agree with that. In the stadium, in the air, I thought Calafiori was terrific, and that'll probably get missed a little bit. And I also want to shout out Eberechi Eze, who I think had the most expected assists after he came onto the field, even at halftime, of any player.
In his first
and
game
that ball,
at right centre mid.
In his first game, and that ball through is what you buy Eze for. Unfortunately, it didn't lead to the winner, and we won't be talking about it. But shout out to him. I think there were some really good individual performances. Even Madueke first half that might get missed. But look, we've discussed a lot about the game. We'll probably come to many more aspects of it. In the Questiono Ronaldos, you get priority access to questions if you are a Discord member, which is access through a Patreon or YouTube member subscriptione Ronaldo. I'm going to stop doing that. Which you can get. You get loads of other stuff. You get, if you want to be a director, you can get voting rights on Scouted. You can get the call-ins. You get access to the Tactics Corner, George's Tactics Show. You get loads of other stuff, and then you get access as a normal sort of North Bank member, normal, regular Joe, North Bank member, to the new rewatch, to the scouted episodes, to ad-free episodes, loads of stuff. But yeah, let's go to the Discord and have a little look here. Let's go with... Actually, there was a really good question from someone, which I will summarise because it's quite long. Ichigo, who I think we've chatted before on the director's box, mate. Essentially, the question, I'm not going to read it all because it's a really well thought out question, but it's quite long. He's making the point that you could look at, say, the great Pep City teams, KDB in the right half space, or you play it to the wingers and they cut back. Klopp with the direct counter-attacks with quick wingers. You can look at Fergie's teams. You can look at Wenger's teams in the central access or whatever, Mourinho, whatever it might be. You can look at certain big teams in the Premier League era and think about a goal the type of goal they score. And his question is essentially, do we have that? And if we don't, is that a problem? I think that's quite a good question, Rohan. I wondered what you...
I think we do.
I
do think we have a specific move. It is that cross that comes in when we come inside to the half space and we hit it to the back post. Like in the same way that Kevin De Bruyne whips it across face of goal, in which it's an outswinger as opposed to an inswinger that we hit. I think that is our trademark move, that we look to get Saka into that situation. You see it every single time. Saka gets onto the ball. You've not got anybody on the front post. We're overloading the back. We're making it difficult for the far side fullback, and we're looking to score from that situation. And it's a really difficult cross to prevent when the quality is good, because the back line, when Saka has the ball, they have to push out. They can't sink too deep. But then the moment they push out, our players know that we're going to perform that sequence, that action. So they go forward, and the back line has to then react. And it happens so quickly. And we've scored a lot of goals from that situation. I mean, we saw it in the FA Cup, with Pepe. To Aubameyang, and we see it with Saka. So I do think that's our trademark move. And I think it is important to have specific sequences that teams know of. I think with Jurgen Klopp, it is the high counter press that they're just able to create so much chaos that allows them to create these opportunities. I find it really interesting because I read a study, I think it was in 2021, where, and Mikel kind of alluded to it I think it was Bilbao, where he's saying the game is becoming a lot tighter, the spaces are smaller. So, he's kind of alluded to how your counter press can create your best opportunities at times, because it's a lot easier to create chances when the opposition is not set in their shape. And that's what Jurgen Klopp was able to make his name from, in terms of how high energy it was. So I do think we have a move. Do we need to have more? Yeah, maybe. So
yeah. I mean, no one's going to like this, but corners.
I was going to be very deadly serious with that.
Yeah, we've scored 33 goals from corners since the beginning of 2023-24. Like, I think, I know people don't like that, but it's actually probably more repeatable, probably more consistent, probably more trainable, probably more coachable. Go on, George.
I was not even going to laugh in saying that. I think, why does it get looked down less than other ones if we're talking about a sustainable, repeatable pattern of play for over 2 years? Like, has the sample's surely been big enough? They make spots about how, here come Arsenal again. Every commentator does it. And yet I'm supposed to look down on it as a lesser of a goal. Last time I checked, a set piece goal counts for the same as a counter-attacking goal, which counts the same as a Wenger central progression goal. You don't get more points for scoring a particular type of goal. Last time I checked, I could be wrong. But the point is, after that, I think when you talk about actual specific patterns of play, people just want to ignore it. Like, Rohan, you made a really brilliant point about the back point cross. I personally would say overload the right-hand side, cut back to the top of the box. It's been repeatable constantly. You want to talk about even off the corners, not necessarily a ball into the box, but the workaround where there's a short pass and then a ball at the top of the right-hand side of the box, where Partey, Declan Rice, multiple people have received that kind of pass, that shoot on sight, and have got goals. There are absolutely patterns that if people want to go into and really care about to look, that we do repeat. It basically comes down to, why does set pieces have to be our identity? And people do look down upon that. And to a certain extent, I understand it, because I'm sitting there and I'm saying, would I personally subjectively like to see prettier football? Yes. But I just push back on the idea that why that can't be a sustainable, proven pattern of play, given the fact that we've got over 2 years of sample and we have the best deliverers of set pieces in the world. Why would I not lean into something like that? If that's a skill, like when you're building these teams, Mourinho, Klopp, and whoever didn't just say, these are the traits I'm doing because I believe that they're pretty. They also did it because that's the tools that they had available to themselves. So if they had the best deliverers of corners in the world, I guarantee you that set pieces would be an identity of other teams if they had that quality. They simply don't. And the quality of your players and your tools dictate 90% of your coaching tactics over subjective coaching, what you want. And I will end on Sean Dyche, my favorite thing when he would talk about it. This idea of basically you got to get the ball in that end of the pitch and prevent them from coming back is something that he believes his team should do. But if he had creative players, he would be playing creative football. Yeah. And he talks about it plenty. And I think that we do, as fans, potentially over-index style. And maybe that comes from us particularly, by the way, as Arsenal fans, because that is our identity. And I don't want to, again, dissuade people. Like, let's be honest. How many people did you know growing up in the past, 10, 15 years? If you talk about your journey towards Arsenal, how many people said the way we played, they found beautiful in between that period of 04 to 012 or 2012? It was a part of people's growing up supporting identity. So I can't just dismiss it as it doesn't matter. It does matter to people.
It does. And also, as we was kind of saying about the game, it all depends. Did you win? But people will love it. People will look back on the set pieces and go, "Oh, how amazing we were at set pieces!" If we win,
Man City and Liverpool in their seasons when they win titles, they're fantastic at set pieces as well. And a lot of the games they decide by set. I mean, Liverpool's most recent win in the Champions League was through a set piece goal. So
doesn't count.
Doesn't count, no.
Let's stay on the Discord. We are, 55 minutes into the episode, so hopefully the people who are listening to dunk on us for zero reason and not actually have an interesting conversation are gone. So you know what I'm about to talk about. Why do you think we're still not really playing to Gyökeres' strengths and seem to be still playing long balls up to him, either expecting him to win headers or play with back to goal? And there were some concerning numbers. Gyökeres created 0 XG against Man United, Man City, and against Liverpool, which is a concern. Look, Mikel himself has said we need to do better. I believe there are aspects to his game that we are not getting the most out of. Rohan, where do you stand on this so far? We're still early. But yeah, I think so much of this Gyökeres conversation I find really draining and jarring. And it's all very binary. And I think it's ultimately about trying to get the most out of what we have. But equally, we have to be able to say when a player is not functioning, and we have to look at ourselves when we're not functioning and try and find some kind of balance between those. So where do you see it?
I mean, we said it every single time. When Gyökeres doesn't score, we're going to have this discourse. When Gyökeres does score, he's the best thing since sliced bread. And it's just two polarizing opposites, which is just, it's tiring, it's draining. It's a combination of both. Like we said it, I think it was on TCP Live, the Bilbao game. Now, obviously, there needs to be emphasis on hitting the ball into the channel. That's where Gyökeres thrives off. But teams are also very good at pressuring you in scenarios where you can't just hit it into the channel. You have to hit it into the centre forward, and he's got to make it stick, and then you've got to play off it. And that aspect of Gyökeres' game is something that isn't refined, and we've seen that. I think people are also seeing it where every time the ball gets hit into him, he seems off balance and he falls to the ground, But when he's, as George alluded to, when he's in the channel, there's so many times where he's running and he's just barging off Diaz, he's barging off Guardiola, they're on the floor and he's on his bike, So it's about getting the balance there between the player improving to the team, but the team also doing more for Gyökeres. I mean, I do think that situation, I think it was Trossard, he cuts it in. I think he's got a tap in there where it just deflects off.
Mikel mentioned.
Yeah, I think it deflects just off Guardiola, I think, and he was in a position to have the tap in. And those sorts of scenarios, we need to create more for him. But equally, he does need to get better at the back-to-goal play game, because we can't just play the one way in which we hit the ball into channel, because it's not possible every single time. This is not Sporting, this is not Coventry. He has qualities that this team does lack in, but equally, there are things that he does need to do better. And I do think that Havertz being available would take the pressure off Gyökeres a lot as well. So I think there's that element to it.
I know that sounds mad. But I actually think it might be his biggest issue right now is Havertz not being fit, because I think he would affect games much differently coming on for 45 minutes in different spaces, able to sort of impact games in a different way while he's building up his fitness. There was this moment yesterday where the ball breaks in the box with Donnarumma, and it is a pure 50-50 between Gyökeres and Donnarumma, and Gyökeres is closer and he's on his heels. And those sorts of moments, I go like, I don't, I can make rationalizations for certain things that you do. I can't excuse that sort of stuff. What I will say is, from his perspective, and something that has really surprised me with, is the gravity he creates in the last line. He really creates massive spaces. And we talk about, the spaces that Havertz creates, and that's in a different way, maybe, in more settled blocks, etc., the sort of spaces in behind. Gyökeres creates massive gaps that we are not exploiting. And I think if we're playing more with the tempo in the final third, we're talking about the tempo in the final third, I think he would really benefit once those spaces are opening up, if the ball's moving a little bit quicker and he can come in behind. I think you're bang on about the back to goal play. I think there is there's when I see balls going across the box, and I've signed someone who Mikel in when we actually signed him spoke about his box movement. I'm seeing 3 balls go back across the 6-yard box from Madueke and Trossard, I think it was, and you're not on the end of them. I can excuse you having 10 touches or whatever it is. I can't excuse that, because that's your job. If the ball is that side, I need you there. I need you to be there. And that some of that is chemistry, some of that is knowing where the ball's going to be, some of that is it's just learning your movements of your teammates. But when that happens 3 times in a game, for me that should be enough for one of those for him to be on the end of it. So it's complicated. It's both him and us, but we shouldn't shy away from it either.
Just to quickly add on to the point, in terms of the gravity, this is the point I was making at the start of the pod in terms of, the 2 centre-backs were 2v1 against Gyökeres every single time. And, City, I think, just naturally they are a team. I don't think they believe their backline can withstand the running game. But that opened up space for Marino to receive, because Gyökeres is pinning both. And we just weren't able to work that situation. Ultimately, it's still teething issues. It's one of those ones where he could score against Newcastle, but let's not go over the top. And equally, if he doesn't score against Newcastle, let's not go over the top. Do you know what I mean? So,
George?
I feel difficult talking about this, because I feel like I've been really specific about the things I feel that Gyökeres has struggled with, and I'm seeing them. There's nothing here that I haven't felt like I've seen. In terms of the contact, I made the point multiple times when we did scout, he has a trouble sitting in the challenge, I like to call it. Actually, when we talk about pinning people, when he is head on trying to sit in the challenge and physically pin a center back, he can't do it. He's really inconsistent in terms of that type of pinning. When he's running in the channels and he's going shoulder to shoulder, he's actually not just okay, he's great at holding off challenges in terms of going into it. However, when you talk about having 0, can you repeat the number, because I don't want to be exaggerative, but it's almost 0 XG against United.
No, it is 0.00 XG against United, Liverpool and City.
Okay. I would throw it back on you guys. When we're talking about spaces, okay? And we're talking about the spaces that Gyökeres can affect. We have 2 teams. In theory, it should be top 6 teams that afford you more space. You don't assume Arsenal will just put themselves into a low block against these teams, generally speaking. They tend to be more open, is one thing. I'd say that is genuinely worrying, that there are game states that you would argue there would be more space and he's able to generate 0 XG. Like, that is not, to me, at 3 games, that's not nothing to sniff at. Now, if he's going to affect the physical mid-block games, your West Hams, your Fulhams, your Newcastles, and score, I equally won't poo-poo that. That will have won us the title. And those are things that we desperately lack. That's another example and sample of large space that you should thrive. I will never make, personally, Gyökeres, and I don't believe it's fair to expect this, somebody who will thrive against low block teams in the box when it's packed. I just simply don't think he's got the skill set in terms of his box movement to really thrive in those areas. I truly do feel that it's been an issue. It's static. We've seen so many times he's on his heels. It's not just the game that you're referencing against City. For me, Alex, it's like even against Anfield, when Martin Odegaard does that reverse ball and he's on his heels there to react. It's another case of against a settled low block, or a scenario in which a settled block, he's reactive and not proactive. Whereas when he's in the channels, he's incredibly proactive. So there is a bit of, let's see sample in terms of the game state he thrives in. Fair. There's also rightful justification if he can go and sit there and perform against the type of teams that have killed us and our title challenge for essentially so long. So I'm going to be consistent. I don't look for Gyökeres to thrive in these top 6 games. I do look them as justified concerns for how we can actually play him. And if you want to talk about there being a dedicated starter, this is exactly the reason I feared for saying he's a dedicated starter, because there's going to be games that I feel are Havertz games and there are Gyökeres games. But if they both perform to what they have to do, if we have Havertz available for the top 6 and Gyökeres for everything else, and they're both scoring consistently, you're not going to see me complain. You're not even going to see me say anything bar he is phenomenal and doing his job. And I think it's really that simple for me.
And that's why, as I say, I think it sounds mad, but I do think Havertz missing is his biggest issue. Like, I really do. I think we'd be having very, very different conversations about Gyökeres, and I actually think he would have impacted certain games. He might have even won us this game. Who knows? You know what I mean? I really do feel that. So yeah, it's a complicated one. And look, online discourse is online discourse, but I just hate that this whole thing, and it's going to be people joking about Timberlands and that sort of stuff. Or he's the greatest striker in the world and Arsenal aren't using him correctly. It's so boring.
Yeah,
it's so boring. And it really just blocks us from having interesting conversations.
And it's not fair on him either, by the way.
Yeah,
it's not fair on him to have that kind of commentary. Like, whether you like him or you don't, it's not fair. It's just, I will keep it consistent. Same way that I do with Martinelli and other people. If you're going to expect things that players can't do, like Odegaard being some transition runner, that's just craziness. It's not him. Highlight the skills that are positive. Let's use him in those skills. And other than that, let's not expect him to be something that he isn't. It's that simple.
It's petty little wars. That's what it is, between the people who don't like him and the people who do like him. And then every time there's an opportunity to pounce, when he scores against Nottingham Forest, brilliant. He's, elite. And then when he doesn't score, Timberlands, he's got jeans on, towing a caravan, all these sorts of things. I think Port Vale and resting him, I think could do him good, because he has played a lot of football.
I would love to see Martinelli down the middle. Absolutely love it. Let's do one more from the Discord. Now that Madueke is injured, says Ivan Smith, how much of a pain in the arse is this 1-in, 1-out injury system we appear to have going? And just to give you some context, so I think this is missing out a Ben White one as well. Yeah. Man United, Havertz got injured. Leeds, Saka and Odegaard got injured. Liverpool, Saliba got injured. Forest, Odegaard got injured. Man City, Madueke got injured. I can't remember which game White got injured in, but he was injured in one of those. I mean, we're just in this mad situation. I don't know. I think I saw, I can't remember which group chat it was in, but George, something about some, I don't know if we're even allowed to mention it, but maybe if you want to mention it, please do, about sort of the medical stuff that was being said in that chat. But yeah, I mean, there's lots of discussion about this, and I feel very, very lost in terms of like how to actually like analyze this, because I see people, and I fully get it in the same way that I get people just saying that manager doesn't want to win and all this sort of stuff. Like, I understand how you got to that point. This is club incompetence. You can't keep blaming luck. But then I'm also like, but Odegaard's just fallen on the same shoulder twice. And like, how can you account for what happened to Noni Madueke, and how can you account for the hamstring stuff? I can get on board with and go like, okay, well, there's something here. There's a repeated pattern. But at some point, like but then I keep going, oh, it's just like luck, and then it just sounds delusional. So I don't know. I don't know. Basically,
I think certainly from my perspective, I'll keep it very short and sweet. If I give an opinion on this, I become an ultra crepidarian. I just do not know. I genuinely don't know. Like, I feel like other teams.
Have you seen this word, George? He loves it.
I have not, actually. Like, I learn sometimes some of these. Melancholy is a new one for me too.
I'm actually so annoyed by that one. Did I actually pronounce it really badly? Or?
Right at the top of the pod as well. Real shame.
But
go on, George. I'm sure you got.
I struggle. I think it just comes from a lack of experience, and I think anybody that's in the field remotely looks on it and just dismisses it, because it's just not logical. We don't look at those things. I'll tell you where I would be concerned medically. And Alex, you had a completely valid point. If you have repetitive soft tissue injuries, so not just even hamstrings, but you had multiple quadriceps, multiple calves, we call soft tissue injuries those things, the muscular strains. If you had multiple muscular strains to multiple players in a short period of time, I would start to look at load. I wouldn't necessarily look at the department and in illegitimate training exercises that the freaking top 1% of sport, but I would start to look at load. Have we managed load? Have we managed recovery in the right way? And those are medical decisions that you can make and also get wrong. They are, because it's not objective. There's a subjectivity to recovery. How, like, I don't get a scan that says Havertz must return in 21.2 days. And then boom, you're done. Like, that's not how medicine works. It's not how injury rehab works. And so there is a subjectiveness to it. So yes, there's a way to get wrong. I will just say really quickly, anytime that you have heard of any injury being known 24 hours that is significant, like an ACL, MCL, meniscus, anything like that, they are lying, flat out. I can say that confidently. Why? You don't do scans, guys. In order for you to do a scan, your swelling has to come down. And I've talked about this before. So anytime you hear somebody confidently say that we know or fear that there's an ACL, you don't know. You simply don't know until you get those scans.
You're an ultra-crepidarian.
Yes.
That's what you are, right?
Yeah. And I will say, by the way, ACLs are actually quite unique because they have a physical manipulation test. It's called the Lockman test, where you literally just have someone on a flat surface and they're able to manipulate the joint. And they have it's something like 70 to 80% accuracy. So they can be pretty confident if you've completely torn something because of that. That is like when your knee is so lax, it actually moves. But generally speaking, I'll just wrap it up and put it in a bow very simply. If you have a major injury, we're talking huge ligaments being torn and whatnot, that player is going to swell. You won't know until 48 hours. So anybody saying less than 24 hours that they know for a fact or anything like that is lying, respectfully. And then lastly, if I was to criticize a medical department, so I'll give you a scenario it would be repetitive soft tissue injuries to multiple players within a short period. So I'd think within 2 to 3 months, if I start to see anything like 4 or 5 soft tissue injuries amongst different players, I'm starting to say, okay, have we managed load and recovery as a medical unit? Well, I have no way to determine that, but that's when I would question a medical incompetence.
Yeah, it's patterns is the only thing I think we as fans really can, certainly fans without medical expertise, can look at. And it's the soft tissue stuff. It's stuff like, I read this article, I think it was from James Ollie in the ESPN, talking about the way they handled Gabriel coming back from Brazil in the March international break before he got injured, like stuff like that. If that happened again, that's when I start to go, okay, well, this is just a pattern.
Yeah.
Like I saw this. I'm using very heavy air quotes here, people, if you're not watching us. Analysis of Rice not playing a pass to Zubamendi, essentially, and saying that was proof that they have no chemistry. And like that is literally, like, it's just, and it's that type of thing. It's like you take one bit of information, extrapolate out like that. It's like you can't. You have to look for patterns.
Associative coherence.
Isn't it not associative coherence?
Do you know what, just my final point on this, I also think, when it comes to like multiple soft tissue injuries, right, surely we then also have to look at what's happening in the league with other clubs. If they're also experiencing the same sort of thing, and it's another word, ubiquitous, hopefully I've pronounced that right.
Ubiquitous. He's 0 for 3.
I'm 0 for 3. 0 for 3. However, if that is the case, then there's surely got to be a wider discussion, right, as opposed to just an isolated one on Arsenal. And no more word of the days for me today. I
love you, Rohan.
I'll start again next week.
Absolutely.
I'll start again next week.
I absolutely love you. Let's do a couple of questions on X to finish this off. This is from Cal. Slightly off topic, but why hasn't MLS featured more? I think he gives us something in midfield from an attacking point of view. Jokes aside, a question about Miles Lewis Skelly. Rohan, where is he? Is his career at Arsenal done?
Mikel doesn't like...
Me on the thumbnail like this.
Mikel doesn't like young players. He hates the youth. He hates the youth. No, I think... Listen, I'd like to see more of Miles. I just don't think the game was for Miles, personally, in terms of the way that it was going. Do you know,
sometimes it's not about you. It's about the other player. It's about how good Calafiori is. And I think this gets missed a little bit. And we're in this kind of zero-sum game thing in football, which is true. Football is a zero-sum game. But people aren't a zero-sum game. Calafiori is having probably his best period in an Arsenal shirt, and Miles, he's in Miles' position.
I agree.
I really think it's that simple. And he will play a lot of football this season, Miles. I also think, George, I don't know how you feel, maybe he needs a bit of a time out of the spotlight. He's had a crazy year.
Yeah, I don't.
Just a little bit of like
breather. Yeah, look, I personally, I don't even look twice at it because, like you said, I think Calafiori's been brilliant, and we've also brought in Hincapié. Like, I think we as a fans should have expected that Miles's, playing time would have been affected by those things. I mean, effectively, Calafiori was injured and not available for the period that he started. Like, I think people a lot of times do forget that. It wasn't because, look, Miles took his opportunity and he made the position his own. 100% there's individual excellence that was applied there. But also at the same time, let's just call facts facts. Like, Calafiori also just wasn't available to the point of even challenging Miles at that period as well. So now when you add that in addition to Hincapié, like, you're looking at two players that played that position, and maybe we want to do something different. The one thing I will probably slightly push back on is this idea of, can we see Miles in midfield now a lot more? The way the squad has been built should point towards that. And it's games like Port Vale that you're going to sit there and say, do I always have to see Miles as a left back? No. There should be instances in which we're seeing some minutes in midfield, and we should start to see that grow. And the idea is, we may see a lower Miles season in total minutes, but if that means greater importance in terms of being a second or third option as opposed to Merino, I'd call that progress, even if the minutes go down. It's all about understanding value to the squad, and that's where it is for me. It's not necessarily minutes being a linear trajectory. It should be value to the squad.
I can't remember if I said this on the podcast, but I imagine this was part of the contract conversations.
Absolutely.
Of like, basically, you might actually get less minutes if you want to play midfield, and that will start off as a case. But can any of us see Merino and Norgard at the club like in 3 years?
No.
For me, no.
No chance.
So even 18 months. So who knows? I think just quickly before we wrap up, Hincapié wasn't in the squad.
He was injured. Mikel had said
he was.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's funny, man. Kepa, Eze, Luis Skelly, Martinelli, Mosquera, Waneri, Saka, Norgard, White. Who misses out?
Yeah. There's always going to be an uncomfortable conversation. There's always going to be one. I
said this in the tactical corner as well, like as a little side comment. Guys, our bench doesn't pick itself. There's going to be a top player that's missing. And this is without, by the way, forget the injuries of people to come back in terms of your Havertz and whatnot. Jesus as well. To come back. There's a lot.
I did this, sorry to plug myself, but I did this short recently where I looked at the squad depth. If you had a starting 11 of Eze, Gyökeres, Saka, Rice, Odegaard, Zubimendi, Calafiori, Gabriel, Saliba, Timber, Raya. You might disagree with that pick, but that's an average starting 11, right? Then your bench is Kepa, White, Luis Skelly, Hincapié, Norgard, Madueke, Havertz, Martinelli, Waneri, right? You miss out Trossard, Dauman, Jesus, Norgard, and there's one more, hang on. It's coming up. Who is it? Trossard, Mosquera, that was it. Trossard, Mosquera, Jesus, Merino, and Dauman, forgive me. That's crazy. Think about those 5 players. That is crazy.
But currently, right, with Mikel and the way that we've set the squad up, they're feeling vindicated by the fact that the injuries that we've had already.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So
if you get an injury a game.
Can I ask a question actually for you guys? Like, okay, we don't know the exact 11s, but like, let's call this last 11 that we chose against Man City the first 11. Let's just call it that way. What is your favorite substitute? Like,
we spoke about this on the
about
Live,
this,
actually,
because it isn't for me a guarantee. Like it's really strange because we've got 9 subs, right? And I genuinely think that we're going to be leaving out players that you would have expected to start potentially or have prime depth.
Yeah, I wonder if the way we manage it is like there's games where Rice just isn't even in the squad. You know what I mean? Yeah. We might take that risk. I don't know.
Like Port Vale, you could see him not being in the squad for that.
Yeah, he's just but I mean even Premier League games, certain Premier League games where let's say we've made the decision that it's going to be Mosquera and Gabriel, Saliba just isn't even in the squad. You know what I mean? Like maybe we do that. I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, it's really interesting. It's really interesting. I mean, are we going to get to that point? Are we ever going to have a full
that's the thing,
squad?
isn't it? Are we even going to get there?
Yes. Right, so we'll finish there. Thank you all for listening. As we say, you can always get extra content, ad-free podcasts and stuff on the Patreon side. And yeah, just loads of good stuff. But it'd be great to have you over there if you want to support us. Really appreciate you guys tuning in every week. Thank you, Rohan.
Thank you, sir. I've had a stinker with the words.
Not your best pronunciation performance.
No, certainly
but you're cooking on the analysis.
Certainly a U level. I'm not even, I was better off not even turning up for the exam, to be honest.
George, have you got a word for the day?
I have no word for the day. I will just let Rohan take that. He does so well in terms of
help me out, George,
teaching me.
Thanks for watching, and thanks for keeping it Arsenal.
Tens of thousands of football fans came to Highbury. This was one kind of queue the ladies thoroughly enjoyed.
Electrifying. Inspiration.